I would like to welcome everyone to our small or big, depending on the view, live event where we will try to speak about the Baltic perspective in terms of the future of AI regulation in Europe. And what is the future of AI in Europe in general? So today we have 9 awesome speakers representing their own communities in each of the Baltic states and policymakers. And also I would like to extend a special welcome to Ms. Irina Orsich from European Commission DG Connect, who will share with us the latest information about what's happening in Brussels, and which is very important for us, all of us here in the Baltic states. And I wish all of the viewers, which we have quite a lot at the moment, to enjoy, and hopefully we will all learn from each other quite a lot. So without further ado, I would like to ask the first speaker, Mr. Dovydas Čilutka, to present the Lithuanian AI ecosystem. And let's hear it from you.
All right. Thank you, Runas. Let me start sharing my presentation. Should be good. So hello, everyone. My name is Dovydas, and today I'm going to tell you about Lithuanian artificial intelligence ecosystem. So first, let me introduce myself. Currently, I am the president of the Artificial Intelligence Association of Lithuania. I'm also a machine learning team lead at Vinted, and I'm also a founder of Trustworthy AI learning community. So today I'm going to tell you about Lithuanian AI in academia, tell you more about our companies and startups, and finally finish with our AI strategy and how do we govern AI initiatives and overall the governance of AI in Lithuania. So let's start with academia. So this part will cover colleges, universities, digital innovation hubs, science valleys, and etc. So we have these 6 universities who all of them have AI modules with their study programs. Kaunas Technology University has just launched a dedicated AI machine learning bachelor degree, and 3 other universities are preparing their master's degree programs for accreditation. So the universities are trying really hard to provide education for people who are interested in learning more and becoming artificial intelligence experts. We also have multiple other organizations who are doing artificial intelligence. So we have 2 science valleys with experience in developing AI solutions. We also have 3 digital innovation hubs with capacity to work with AI in their innovation hub framework. Let me talk about companies and startups. So the most important thing, I guess, is the AI adoption. How much have we progressed with adopting AI in the industry, and also about international collaborations and operations. So first, a lot of companies are in various stages of AI transformation, and namely their companies are investing in data analysis capabilities first, data warehousing, building data lakes, later building machine learning platforms to deploy the models which they have produced, and finally on the formation of their own machine learning strategy and management practices. So we have out of all our companies, we can identify about more than 20 companies with strong AI capabilities. So with most of these practices in place, namely neurotechnology, Oxybit, Vinted, Pixelmator, Exacaster, Token Mill. We also have over 90 startups using AI in the products which we are have already built, or in which we are building products based on artificial intelligence. So especially in the tribal AI community, I know maybe 5 startups who are trying to make their product because AI enables them the opportunity to do these things. So they have waited for AI to enable these things to happen, and now leveraging this new technology to make new and unique disruptive products. Then the one really interesting fact, which is very prevalent in our industry, is a lot of international collaborations and operations. So we are doing everything, pretty much nothing is strictly local. So from the infrastructure to consultations about be it machine learning management or machine learning best practices, data science, innovations, things like that. So we are consulting with I don't know, maybe tens of different countries. People in tens of different countries, and we are doing a lot of trainings. These are in-house trainings, but again, they're often delivered by international speakers. So in fact, this AI is, especially in our industries, it's very, very international, and we do collaborate a lot on the full vertical of these AI applications. And finally, let me talk a little bit about the strategy and the governance. So first of all, we want to make our AI strategy community driven. So that involves, that means involving industry experts from the very, very first steps in forming of our strategy and policy making. And we very much try to promote AI adoption and provide support instead of, limiting or slowing them down. So that's, in my mind, that's the key strategic thing which we are trying very hard to achieve. We do that by, first of all, the Artificial Intelligence Association, which represents the whole industry and academia experts. Also companies. The association unites all the AI professionals and organizes events, represents in general the AI community. From the governmental side, we have the Ministry of Autonomy and Innovations, which is the main governmental body which is dealing with AI. Then we have various AI initiatives. So one of the most important ones are the AI Boost Lithuania, which tries to build this bridge between private and public sectors. So, our vision is if we really try to form the Lithuania's AI strategy based on the voice of the experts, we must have this bridge to be heard, and association is collaborating on this project. We also have AI think tanks, which is a governmental consultative body, which there most of the stakeholders of the ecosystem are present and consulted, and also take part in shaping the major decisions. Finally, we have the AI learning community, Tribe of AI. And I would like to end my presentation with telling you about the vision. So we envision that companies which are right now in the process of their AI transformations, they would complete the processes and will be able to use AI to deliver massive business value in their products, in their services, in whatever they do. We also see that educational institutions are educating the next generation of AI professionals, which are already in short demand in the industry. And finally, the large increase in the number of AI experts. As I mentioned, we see a shortage of AI experts in the industry, especially people with experience and with knowledge of best practices. So we want to see a massive increase in the number of experts. So Runas, that's all I have for today. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Dovydas, and on behalf of AI Boost Lithuania, I would like to thank you and the rest of the guys from your association, from Artificial Intelligence Association of Lithuania, for incredible cooperation in almost each and every question. So let's hope we will continue doing that. And next I will ask Mr. Indrek Onik from Estonian Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications to present what's bread and butter with AI in Estonia. Please, Indrek.
Thank you very much, Runas, and also everybody else joining in as speakers or listeners to this event. I'm going to cover most of the same aspects as Dovydas just did from the Estonian perspective. And as he did, also introduce myself maybe very quickly. So I'm the Global Affairs Director from the Government CI Office in the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications. And we are basically leading the AI take-up in Estonia, and I will try to cover this in my short speech as well. So in our case, in 2019, in May, our expert group led by our minister and government office presented proposals on advancing the take-up of artificial intelligence in Estonia. And we call this the Estonian National AI Strategy. The current strategy has been prepared based on the proposals that came up from the expert group and were adopted at the cabinet meeting last year in July. And it's a sum of actions the Estonian government will take to advance the take-up of AI in both private as well as the public sector, and increase also relevant skills and research and development base, as well as develop the legal environment. Between 2019 and 2021, the government will invest at least 10 million euros to implementation of the AI strategy that we've adopted, and in all of the different directions. What we've been doing as of earlier this year, there were at least 27 AI solutions deployed in the Estonian public sector. And the goal is to have at least 50 AI use cases by 2020, so the end of this year. Similarly, Estonian companies are already using AI in several business areas for optimizing business processes, automating customer service, in product quality control, risk mitigation, and also elsewhere. And in addition to this, the public sector doings and the private sector doings, there's a very strong and active cooperation between the public and private sector, as well as the academia. This is visible in creation of AI, where it's led by the public sector, but in essence still created together. And also when creating common parts of AI, they can be reused by any stakeholder or any interested party. And this has turned out to be very popular. The reusing the parts of AI. And when we're talking about awareness and education, there are several projects like Elements of AI by Taltech, and the Basic AI course by the University of Tartu, also both free to anyone to participate. In the public sector, the implementation of AI has covered a very wide variety of areas, and we cannot really specify it with one specific domain. The first projects have proven that even small projects might bring significant benefit and advantage, which is a very, very positive outcome for us to see. And some of the cases that we now have in Estonia are the following. For example, our Information System Authority is using machine learning for detecting anomalies and incidents on the traffic of the Estonian data exchange layer, X-Road, which by now is, I'd say, world famous, or at least well known globally. We use predictive analytics to decide where to send police for traffic regulations. And there we've seen that the system is well used in cities. However, the algorithm does not work well in rural areas. The Estonian Unemployment Insurance Fund matches job seekers with open positions using AI, and it helps a job seeker to match with the right job. And the current algorithm is also being developed further to with the job seeker profiling algorithm. And one of the interesting aspects that I've seen myself is also in agriculture, when AI-assisted application helps to track activities in farming methods and facilitate information sharing between authorities who inspect the use of government subsidies to farmers. Satellite images of the fields are processed by a deep learning algorithm, which assesses each pixel of the image and determining if the patch of field has been cut or not, and whether or not the subsidies have been used accordingly. And then we can take further actions, either notifying the farmer that this needs to be done, or even something else. And in healthcare, an AI model is deployed to predict health conditions and healthcare needs of chronically ill patients. So you can see already that there is a wide variety of sectors and domains where it's being used. From the private sector side, of course, there are chatbots. One of the chatbots that we've seen developed in the very recent times is related to the COVID-19 information, accurate information giving for the interested parties, and this was in collaboration with the government, of course. Then we have in the private sector smart heating solutions based on predictive analytics, in healthcare predicting seasonal needs for medicines, and also delivery robots that are capable of functioning in real-life traffic situations. Now, that being all said, we have noticed that some difficulties in base knowledges, and therefore we have specific training for project managers and analytics. Additionally, the usage of AI in the private sector has been a bit lower, similar to digitalization, compared to the public sector in Estonia. One of the things that I'm really keen on talking about is something we call Trustworthy AI, which is an initiative for the next stage of digital public services of Estonia. It's a first vision of how public services should digitally work in the age of artificial intelligence. And it would entail an opportunity for people to use public direct and informational services by voice-based interaction with AI-based virtual assistants. It wouldn't simply be an IT development project to create an AI-based interface to use public services. Instead, the concept itself would actually allow people to get their governmental deeds done from any device and any majorly used virtual assistant in the future. So it's an interoperable network of public sector AI applications, agents, bots, assistants, etc., as well as private sector ones, which could work from the user's perspective as a single united channel for accessing public direct and informational services. Also, maybe the wider perspective there is that it will not be one massive chatbot in technological sense handling all of the interactions and activities under its belly in one big application, rather than our digital government has been built on the principles of distributed architecture and the setup of we aim to keep the same setup in the age of AI as well. From the legal perspective, what we've seen this far is that there is no need for substantial changes in the basics of the legal system. But now and in the foreseeable future, AIs or machine learning, there will be human tools, meaning that they perform tasks determined by humans and express the intention of humans directly or indirectly, even if it seems that the human has given large freedom to the AI. For the sake of legal clarity, of course, it should be ensured that when exercising public powers or performing other public tasks, the actions of AI will be attributed to the state through the company or body that used the AI in the meaning of state liability. And in private relationships, for both natural and legal persons, the AI's actions should be considered the actions of the AI user. matters related to criminal liability need to be expanded, but and include AI and their use by expanding the definition of instrumental execution. Now, that being said, about the legal side, we have a legislative intent going out soon for the changes in the laws that need to be considered when implementing AI. And maybe last but not least, what we see are the benefits in the implementation of the artificial intelligence. It could have, various of those for Estonia. In the public sector, it would allow us to increase the user-centeredness of services, which we are aiming to do, and improve the process of data analysis, and in its essence, make the country work more efficiently by achieving the goals of our development also for the e-government. And it can also the artificial intelligence can also play an important role in the digital revolution of the industry and attract new investments and innovation activity to Estonia. And this is also what we're looking towards as developers of technology are searching for development and test environment that favors artificial intelligence solutions these days. So to sum up, I hope what you can take from this is that there are quite a few initiatives ongoing involving the strong cooperation between the public-private sector as well as the academia. And this is what we've been doing when we started with any type of digital transformation of digital advancements in Estonia. This will try to keep doing this in the future as well. So always a very strong engagement with all of the different participants and sectors of the society. That would be it from my side. Thank you very much, Arunas.
Thank you very much, Indrek. I just want to say that your craft perspective is really inspiring, and I think a lot of countries could learn a lot from that. And well, that's what we are here for, to learn from each other. So thank you once again for your very good presentation. And for the end of the first part, which is introductions of Baltic artificial intelligence systems, I would like to ask our Latvian colleague, Mr. Yanis Ratkevičs, from the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Regional Development, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's correct. I will share my presentation to better understand. Yes, do you see?
Yes, it's perfect.
Yeah, it's perfect. Okay. So what we have, I introduce shortly myself. I'm Yanis Ratkevičs, working in division of state information systems. We do not have a any special position for artificial intelligence in ministry, but I am not now responsible for this topic. What we have about our spendings for as European Union is estimating investments in EU, we see Latvian numbers per capita, which is 10 euros, and our goal, according our informative report, which government approved in 4th February of 2020. Our goal is to reach 39 euros until 2029. Now in Europe, only Denmark reached this goal. Ireland and Finland are close to it. Next is also European estimate about public services in different countries. In Latvia, there is count as at 12, but it's hard sometimes to divide where is the right number, because you can see you can count for example virtual assistants in one institution as one or this assistant for more institutions as one. So this services sometimes is cross sectorial or cross departments, so it can be count differently. So what we have, it's a developed language technologies. It's public virtual assistance, translation, speech recognition, text-to-speech. And we are also building one virtual assistant platform for all public governments, and any institution can take it and train it for their needs with questions and answers. So car number recognition for traffic control, it results in traffic accidents reduction by 36% in places near these photo radars are installed. Other cases, we have state revenue service declaration pre-checking using artificial intelligence. Larger part of the declaration are checked by automatically, and funds paid automatically. Our courts trial time prediction according to how many sites in a court, and in which topics of criminal is there involved to predict how long it will take to make decision for a judge. State land service use laser scanned surface picture for mapping, building process and taxation control for immovable property. And in production, also artificial intelligence for cancer diagnostics and further language technologies improvement. For example, Latvian, Estonian direct translation without intermediary of another language. And I now can invite the Lithuanian colleagues to discuss also Latvian, Lithuanian direct translation tool development. What we have in private sector, it's quite a lot solution. We have real-time TV content analytics platform, or also radio. For example, if you pay for advertisement in radio, in TV, and you don't need to stand near TV and check do your advertisement are shown in exact times. It can be done automatically. Vision system for casino table accounting control. Interactive face motion game to support children with speech and face disabilities. It's fire detection, not only as a smoke detector, but as thermal vision to find unusual places in buildings with hot temperature. It's much more predictive of fire, because if it's too hot in inappropriate place, that means that some malfunction of equipment there is, and it can be start to fire. ESIA, it's emotional intelligence improvement application. Windmill training assistant for team games, like we use it mostly for hockey. It's very popular in Latvia's kind of sport, but it can be used for any other kind of team games. And those others, approximately 30 more or less ready products which have great potential. And more than 6, we think approximately, who deploy any components, also startups in all fields, because partly companies build in-house solution. For example, logistics company building in-house some artificial intelligence solution for analysis and automatization. And it's also sometimes hard to make a border where there is some simply digitalization, or when it's artificial intelligence starts. I think also in next 10 years we will not more talk about artificial intelligence as separately from digitalization at all. I think after 10 years we will talk about digitalization in general, and artificial intelligence be only one of technologies of digitalization. So it be in every watch and every device. About ecosystem, most popular place where all sites who work with artificial intelligence meets. It's Innovation Center of University of Latvia and Microsoft. So there's regular meetings and courses about artificial intelligence, meetings and so on. We have also, we don't have specific NGO for artificial intelligence, but we have Latvian Information Communication Technology Association, which are generally information technologies, Latvian Open Technology Association, Latvian Internet Association, who works also with questions. The Ministry of Environmental Protection and Regional Development, my ministry, we are main responsible body for artificial intelligence, like other aspects of digitalization. In digitalization, mostly public sector and Ministry of Economics, of course, they are more thinking about private sector digitalization. About legal aspects of question, we don't find any need to improve legal regulation, because our regulation now is quite good for or quite technology neutral to use it for in cases of the technologies and cases of artificial intelligence. It's more question about competence of all participants of court, judges, prosecutors, advocates, and so on, to correct interpret existing regulation when there is cases of artificial intelligence come to stage. We do not have precedents at this moment, at least what guys from Ministry of Justice say me that they don't know. Maybe there was, but they don't know cases in Latvia about artificial intelligence aspects in as point of legal disputes. So that's everything shortly about situation in Latvia, and also if later someone have questions, I also can answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Yanis, for your very extensive presentation, and also for jumping into the next topic. Now everyone's pictures are gone, but I hope that stream is still on. It is. So without further ado, I would like to present our next guest, a very distinguished guest, who I hope will tackle not only the main questions of AI regulation in the European Union, but maybe also just a bit mention how European Commission will help member states to increase gender balance in the sector of AI, as we are now represented by 8 or 9 men and only 1 woman in this discussion, and I think it is not really fair. So I give the floor to Ms. Irina Orsik from European Commission DG Connect, and she will give you an extensive presentation on what is going on, everything AI in Europe.
Thank you very much. I'm just trying to share my screen. So can you see my screen? Can you see my PowerPoint, or wait?
We did, but we do not now.
Okay. This is very strange. Now you should have it, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so let me go to the presentation. Yes, here we go. Sorry for the delay. The fact that I'm working in technology does not automatically mean that I'm good in technology. But I see I'm out of the present. Do you have the slideshow or do you have the presentation thing now on the screen?
Now we have a slideshow, normal presenter view. Everything is fine.
Super. Okay. Sorry for the delay. So my name is Irina Osic. I am working with the European Commission in what we call DG Connect. So we are responsible for all kind of topics related to digital. We have been doing research projects in artificial intelligence and robotics since 2004. And we started actually with policy a bit more than 2 years ago in April 2018. That is when we released the strategy AI for Europe. And this strategy is based on 3 pillars. It starts with the first pillar, investment, competitiveness. So really pushing AI forward in Europe and for Europe. And then the second pillar is related to the socio-economic effects of artificial intelligence, and in particular the future of work, employment, what is happening with our society. And under the second pillars, there were a number of studies and reports. Very interesting reading is one, The Future of Work, Work of the Future, which you will find easily on our web pages. This is really interesting to see how our societies are going to develop, and then also with some points about skills needed. And this is also what we already heard in the previous 3 presentations, how important training is, how important skills is. So that you will find back in this report and also the other reports under the second pillar. And then the third pillar is relating to the ethical and legal framework for artificial intelligence. Now, after this strategy was published in April 2018, a number of activities started. So one of them is that we published a call for experts to give us expertise on the questions which were in the communication, raised in the communication. And on that basis, we have a high-level expert group on artificial intelligence, which started its work in June 2018. It had a mandate for 2 years, which means that the work just came to an end. And this group, I will come back to that a bit later, also had 4 deliverables. The first one of April 2019 were the ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI. Then in June 2019, the policy and investment recommendations. And then on that basis, on the basis of the ethical guidelines, which have a number of core principles for trustworthy AI, the unique thing is that the high-level expert group was also working on an assessment list. So not only to give principles and requirements to the developers and deployers of artificial intelligence. I think worldwide there are now close to 200 different guidelines around, but on top of that, to make it really concrete. So to have concrete assessment criteria which developers of AI, deployers of AI can ask themselves to see whether what they're doing is ethical, is trustworthy. And this assessment list was already attached to the initial guidelines of April 2019. The guidelines remained the same, but the assessment list was piloted, was tested, from June last year to the end of the year. So people were asked really to give feedback on how practical this list is, how practical the questions are, how it is for somebody to work with them. And taking into account all these feedback plus 50 different in-depth interview, it was last week actually that the high-level expert group released what is called ALTAI, and this is like the assessment list for Trustworthy AI, which is now online, where one can work with a PDF, where one can also get online feedback, all kind of different possibilities to work with that tool. Now, on the policy and investment recommendations, I'll come also back to that later. And so this is for now about the high-level expert group. But what we also did after the April 2018 communication is that we were starting to have a group together with the member states to work on what we call the coordinated plan on artificial intelligence. This was for the first time adopted in December 2018. It has around 70 different actions in a number of different fields, start with data, with skills, with research, with helping companies, SMEs, ethics, international cooperation. So all kind of measures which the Commission and the member states can pursue in order to help pushing AI forward in Europe. And one important element of the coordinated plan is indeed that all member states committed, and they committed that for the endorsement of the Council in February 2019, to have AI strategies in place, to have them in place by the end of 2019. We are having now 15 member states where the strategies are finalized, and we are having all except for 4. Now you are all in the group of the finalized strategies. There are a number of countries where the strategies are ready to be approved. So this is very imminent. And then there are 4 countries which committed to have a strategy in place by the end of the year, where there is not yet a final draft present. So this is the coordinated plan, and it also said that this is going to be reviewed on an annual basis. Now, the annual basis did not happen like this also because we have a new commission. But in the white paper of February 2020, we are asking questions about the coordinated plan, and we are now also in the process of the revision together with member states. I'll come back to that a bit later. So this is what we have done so far. There's also a bit more, but this is in broad. So with the white paper on artificial intelligence of February 2020, we have 2 main elements. We have the ecosystem of trust and the ecosystem of excellence. And this is something we have been consulting until June, until the 14th June. And we are now in the process of looking into, as I said, the coordinated plan, the review. We are looking into the possibilities and the necessities of new legislation, respectively, a revision of existing legislation in some fields, and all this to happen sometimes by the end of this year, respectively, in the beginning of next year. Just to show you one slide, so indeed we are not isolated. You see on the lower part of the slide, you see the strategies actually until sometimes mid last year. then the slide was full. We had many strategies since then, but this is just to show you, to illustrate you that nationally, European, internationally, there are a lot of strategies happening now, ongoing now. There are a lot of discussions, and we are just part of this. We do it as well. We always hear that the US and China are so much advanced and that we need to catch up, but they're not the only ones. There are a number of countries who have very interesting and very strong strategies and capabilities. And we also have a multilateral international context. So we are very closely cooperating with other international organizations, for example, with the OECD, where actually the recommendation adopted on 22nd, 23rd May was 2019. We had with the G7 very recently. They started the Global Partnership on AI Japan, which is an initiative from France and Canada. You have the G20 Declaration on Human-Centric UI. You have UNESCO and the Council of Europe very actively working on artificial intelligence. You have a number of standardization bodies, the World Economic Forums. You also have a number of companies having their own policies, having their own ethic guidelines. So it is a subject where there are many activities ongoing. Now, I was talking before about the high-level expert group and the policy and investment recommendations. That was what they had presented last year in June. And indeed, this is important also for our policies in the ecosystem of excellence. So I give you a quick overview about some of the main takeaways. To empower and protect humans and society. This relates to skills, but it also relates to something which one could call AI literacy. Then the tailored approach is exactly what we are all doing to look and what are our strengths, how can we build on those strengths. To secure a single European market for trustworthy AI, not that companies, each time they want to sell a product, have to look into all the different rules from the different countries. Ecosystems through sectoral multi-stakeholder alliances. This is something we are doing now. The data economy, very important. Data, one of the key ingredients. Then the role of the public sector. The research, also one of the key ingredients we need. I think I'm getting too long. So education, I was talking to that before. Governance approaches and also the regulatory framework. Indeed, we are working to that. To stimulate an open investment environment. This is also something we are doing. We are working on it with the coordinated plan and in some different contexts, and a holistic way of working, combining a 10-year vision with a rolling action plan. So those were the key takeaways the high-level expert group with their 52 independent experts gave us in June last year. And now they have been working on sectorial considerations. So they were looking into manufacturing, they were looking into health and into public administrations. They were talking a lot to different experts. And now there will be the sectorial recommendations. There is not enough time. And I'm also, since I'm the commission and not in the high-level expert group, I'm not really knowledgeable enough to give you all the details. But what they all have in common, and this is really the recurrent subject, that there is a lot of concern about the skills gap, that we need to do responsible research and innovation, that good governance and a lot of sharing of best practices can also promote regulatory certainty, and that data quality, availability, and interoperability are absolutely key for any European policy. So now I get to the white paper. I was telling you all this before because indeed we got very much also inspired by what the high-level expert group is presenting to us, and by the work. Perhaps I should just say one more word about them. So 52 independent experts, very different fields, from the academia, from business and business associations, and from the civil society. A very diverse group. It was very interesting to listen to the discussions because you can imagine that they were sometimes having very different perspective of things. So this work went into our work on both on the ecosystem of excellence, and I'll get back to that later also for the ecosystem of trust. What we are proposing in the white paper is first of all to continue joining forces with the member states. So to have the new coordinated plan on AI, and we kicked off discussions last week. We are looking now into also new actions on top of the 70 we already had. There is a question on how we could, for example, include questions of environment and climate, and indeed something we are all discussing now with the COVID virus is also how AI can help there in the crisis. Then strengthen research and innovation, very important testing and experimentation sites, so that really people who develop the AI have the possibility to do the practical testing and experimentation under real life conditions, and also to fund a number of big sites in Europe that where then everybody from all the member states could go. And this is a typical point also where we believe that we have an added value to look into the synergies, like what is where, who can work with whom on what, that we don't double all the efforts, but that we can all work together with our strength and use the sites of our neighbors. And then the second part is the networks of excellence. So really to have networks between the different universities, developers, and to see how also there more cooperation is possible. Then third, improve skills, talent. This is absolutely key. It is also what is always told us that this is the most important thing. Now, the sad thing is that as Europe and education, we don't have any power. So we can foster the exchange of best practices, we can finance projects, and we can talk a lot with all different stakeholders really to get a holistic picture of what is good, what is needed. But we don't have the power to do something, to have like regulations or other things in the field. So we are trying our best with the tools we are having at hand really to help Europe improving skills, attracting talent, and also looking that our talent does stay in Europe. Helping SMEs, for that we have the digital innovation hubs. So the sites where really companies can test AI tailor-made for their needs, where they can get advice. And the second part of it is to provide companies with more equity funding. Then the fifth one is to work together with the private sector. So this is only somebody from the public sector who could have written it like this. So more cooperation, public-private sector. On that one, a public-private partnership on AI, data, and robotics. And finally, really to promote AI in the public sectors, to have sector dialogues, and in the future also to have something which we call an Adopt AI program, which should in particular help with procurement. So that it is about the white paper ecosystem of excellence. I will now get quickly to the high-level group, the deliverable on the guidelines for the trustworthy AI. I told you before, there is the last part, which is the assessment list, but there is also a first and a second part. The first part relates to general principles for AI. It needs to be legal. It needs to comply with all the rules and things. And then the second part are the key requirements for trustworthy AI. And we got very much inspired actually in our work also when we were working on the white paper and proposing some legislation to see how we can take them into account and what helps. So the first one, human agency and oversight. The second one, technical robustness and safety. The third one, indeed, privacy and data governance, where with the data protection regulation, we have already many tools in place on which one should build. The question of transparency, and I need to underline that transparency does not mean that everybody needs to disclose an algorithm, but that a system is transparent and that I know that I'm dealing with a system and that I can, as much as possible, try to also see how the system gets to a certain result. Diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness. Here probably I should have the quick statement about women I was asked to have. Diversity is an issue, and we can see with many of the AIs backwards who developed them. And let's say there were some studies showing that if it is a group of, this is now the bad cops in our current life, the middle-aged white men developing something, then this artificial intelligence will also work particularly well for middle-aged white men. But it might not work very well for women. It might also not work very well for younger people or for elderly people, because apparently there's a tendency to take the data from really what is your own background. This is why one of the recommendations from the high-level expert group is also the diversity of the teams developing an AI. Somebody of a different color, somebody who's different somewhere in life might have a different view also on what is needed for a system. The next criteria is societal and environmental well-being. And finally, the last one is the accountability. And then you see here is Altai. So this is the assessment list which just got out last week. And from there, again, I'm back to the white paper and the ecosystem of trust. So what did we take out of these requirements? How did we take them on board as a proposal in the white paper of February? So the first one is the quality of the training data, and that indeed goes hand in hand also with the diversity of the training data. So when I'm building a system for facial recognition, let me get back to the previous example. There are many problems with accuracy when it comes to people of color and when it comes to women. They work normally very well, again, for the white middle-aged men, but not for other parts of the population. So it is important. And the reason is indeed that the training data is mainstream. And so if there is already other training data, no bias in the training data, that's very important. So there would be could be a requirement with regard to the quality of the training data. Then could be a requirement on data and record keeping. so that one keeps the record on how an algorithm was developed and with what data it was developed. Information to be provided has a number of different aspects, one of which is that very often the communication between the developer of an artificial intelligence and the deployer is not really sufficient, and that the operator uses an artificial intelligence for a purpose it was not developed for. So we can imagine this like a bit, we are buying some pills in the pharmacy, and there you have this leaflet about indications and counterindications and what you should be avoiding. But this is also about the information to the end user, that the end user knows that it's dealing with an AI, which sometimes is very obvious. So it's not about Siri telling us each time like this is an AI, but sometimes also it's not obvious. Then robustness and accuracy. I think this is pretty much self-explanatory. Human oversight, so that, for example, when you're applying for a loan or when you're having a job interview and an AI is involved, that there is somebody who then can check the results, and that you can also get like a human view on this. And then we were talking about specific requirements for biometric identification, but also possibly for other sectors, like, for example, in the field of employment. Now, what we proposed in the white paper is that all these requirements only apply for high-risk applications. So it is not that every AI should be regulated, but really that this is relating to high-risk applications. And this is, as we will see later, a very, very tricky one, because it's not obvious to define what is high risk and not. And our objective is to make it very, very clear that there is also legal clarity and predictability for everybody involved. Now, when enforcing these criteria, again, for high-risk applications, there is a possibility to have ex-ante conformity assessments, and there is also the possibility to have market surveillance schemes, which are then ex post control. The solution probably is going to be a mixture of both. And then the next question is, what are we doing with the ones which are not high risk? There we were proposing a voluntary labeling scheme. It's very clear that what we are saying in the white paper is that we want to regulate only where this is strictly needed, and we want to have a minimum of burden for players, and we want to also pay particular attention to the needs of the SMEs and the startups. Now, we have been consulting the white paper between the 19th of February and the 14th of June. We had 1,215 submissions, which is a lot for our standards. And we had on top of that more than 400 PDF contributions, which means that we are not yet through having carefully read everything. What we can give you now is sort of an evaluation of the quantitative results, so where there were multiple choice questions that I can tell you now. This was also published last Friday, so you will find the report on the internet together with the assessment list. And we will be publishing a more extensive report also on the qualitative results, and with all the different PDFs, taking into account all that after summer vacation, whatever that means. So it would be probably sometime end of August, September, or October. So out of the 1,215, 84% came from the EU 27. In that case, 5 from Lithuania, 2 from Latvia, 3 from Estonia. So I'm happy to be here then today with so many of you. And I'm also happy to receive more comments. We had a good spread of, there were plenty of people actually also from other countries, including India, China, Japan, Syria, Iraq, Brazil, Mexico, Canada, the US, and the UK. We had more than 400 citizens, 352 business and industry, including the associations, 160 submissions from civil society, 152 from academia, and 73 from public authorities. 72 described themselves as other, so I cannot tell you who they are. They just said they are other. We have the ecosystem of excellence now again, and there was a very large support for the actions we proposed. So the first one, the revision of the coordinated plan, 87% said it's important or very important. 88% to support the excellence in testing centers. Then we had proposed a network of leading universities. There were 90% agreeing with skills part, digital innovation hubs, and the scale-up funding for SMEs, 69%, the new public-private partnership, 72%, and the Adopt AI program and also the sector dialogues. So the public sector focus, 72%. So in general, a very, very broad support. Then also large support for certain topics. We were asking them what we should include in the next coordinated plans. So 89% excellence in research find important or very important. 86% find developing skills for AI and adapting training programs important or very important. And we can just see that with all your strategies, you're exactly answering to those needs. I think I don't need to go through this slide in detail, but you can see that all the different aspects had very high support rates. So excellence in research, skills again, European data space is found to be very important, testing facilities, then to help the uptake by business and public sector, and finally the financing for startups and innovating SMEs. And even if this looks to be the lowest on the scale, it is still close to 70% of people who are very much in favor of such action. Now, the research and innovation should focus on a network of existing research and excellence centers. So what I explained before about more networking together, more looking into who can do what, sharing work, sharing responsibility, but in particular also exchange. 86% find this very important or important. Then lighthouse research centers, so that we really have research centers in Europe which are, let's say, very fancy, very good, and where we can also attract the best talents to. 64% were in favor, and a public-private partnership for industrial research, 69%. Interesting here that on the public-private partnership from the industry and business respondents, indeed, nearly 90% found this important or very important. Now, then we have asked the question what the digital innovation hubs should focus on. So promoting knowledge transfer and supporting the development of AI expertise for SMEs, 78% are happy with that and supported very much or much. Then supporting partnerships between SMEs, larger enterprise and academia, 76% in favor, and providing access to testing and reference facilities, so the tailor-made solutions for SMEs, 76%. So that was it for the ecosystem of excellence, and let me now go quickly to the ecosystem of trust, what the results were here from the online consultation. So first of all, when the question was raised, like whether people are in favor of new regulation or find that the current system is already sufficient, it was that only 3% believe that the current legislation is fully sufficient. which means that the remaining 97% believe that something needs to be done. Respectively, 4.1% didn't have an opinion. 42% said that there is a need for new legislation, and 32.5% said that current legislation may have some gaps, so that something needs to be done on top of this. So this gives us a relatively clear mandate to continue our work on reflecting upon what is needed in the context of the legal framework. Now, the main concerns the respondents had was that AI can breach fundamental rights and that it can have discriminatory outcomes. And I told you before that we wanted to focus on high-risk AI applications only, and 43 of the respondents agree that compulsory requirements should be limited to high-risk applications. 31% do not agree with the limitation, which means that those people are in favor of having a regulation for all AI. Industry and business are most likely to agree to limiting new compulsory requirements to high-risk AI applications, 55% of them, compared to the 43% if you look in general at the outcome. And you remember I just told you about the requirements we proposed. So they all got a very, very high rate of people agreeing with them. It was, depending on the requirement, between 83 and 91%. Now, on the enforcement, very interesting, 62% support a combination of ex ante and ex post enforcement. Only 3% believe that only ex post market surveillance is sufficient. And 28% believe that there should be an ex ante conformity assessment. And then 21% that this conformity assessment is done by the company, by the player himself. So that is a self-assessment, a self-certification. That was it about the enforcement of the compulsory requirements. Now, respondents are cautious about the, sorry, I forgot something, but I can come back to that later. Respondents are very cautious about the biometric identification systems. So they're 28% in favor of a ban. And there are 29% who believe that the use in publicly accessible spaces should only take place when specific European guidelines or legislation are in place. 19.5% believe that biometric systems should be allowed in publicly accessible spaces only in certain cases, if certain conditions are fulfilled, or if there are other specific requirements which we have put on this of this. And it was only 6.2% who said that no further guidelines or regulations are needed. So, which means that everybody agrees that biometric is a high risk and that something needs to be done, and possibly also on top of what we had proposed. And then this is what I wanted to say after the enforcement, but it is about the voluntary labeling scheme. So there people are relatively divided on how useful this is for the applications which are not considered to be high risk. 21.7% believe that this is much needed, 28.7% that it is needed, but then also 22.8% that it's rather not needed, and 11.3% not at all. So overall responses are rather positive, but still it is one of the most divided questions. And with that, I hope I have answered most of your questions, and I'm happy to get more questions in the discussion Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Irina, for your very interesting presentation. I believe that the challenge for the European Commission and for the whole European Union with all member states probably will be to balance the value-based AI policies with freedom of innovation and freedom of research and development. And that it is a very tricky balance to reach. So we believe that even looking at your slides where you showed the demographics of those who answered, since the first time I saw them last week during a high-level meeting, my first idea was, well, it's not that many companies who actually responded. I really believe that there will be more initiative from the businesses, from AI developers. And we as AI Boost Lithuania, as an initiative, we really strive to become a bridge between the private sector and the public sector, and to voice the concerns, voice the maybe in some occasions fears about the upcoming regulation from the private sector, that they would be heard, and maybe some of the issues are not considered enough. So therefore, for the next part of our event today, we have two speakers from two very different AI developing companies. Each of them are, I would say, world leaders in their own areas. And they will present the cases, how they see that the future AI regulation in the European Union might affect their business. So I, first of all, I ask Ms. Irina to stop sharing her screen. And then I immediately give the floor to Mr. Linas Petkevičius, Dr. Linas Petkevičius from Neurotechnology Lithuania. And, well, be critical.
Okay. So can I share the screen? Will be visible?
I hope so. I still can. Everyone still can see Ms. Irina's presentation. So
I will try to share in a,
oh yeah, it works.
Okay, is it visible?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. So, hello everyone, and dear colleagues, representatives of public sector, as well as Irina Horsic. So, today I would like to present some illustrative cases and impact assessment of AI regulations to the field of biometrics. So, we had a lot of slides from the previous presentation, so maybe we could clearly see what would impact. So first, it's really nice to see all the initiatives and stimulus to the field of AI proposed by European Commission. And we truly think that the creation and the development of AI technologies and the breakthroughs within AI are crucial for whole Europe. We also agree that creation of reliable and sophisticated products will raise the trust of the field of AI. We also think that no fragmentation policy, so basically the same regulatory framework within EU, will make the field of AI more competitive globally, and we will not have the problems to solve various problems within the European Union. Also, the idea to develop the AI excellence centers and AI digital innovation hubs are really good plan to start with this. Now, one of the fields mentioned in the AI white paper is biometrics. And currently, it's under high-risk definition. So today, I would like to talk about this field. So in the Europe, we have a lot of biometrics companies. In French, there's companies like Thales and Idemia. In Slovakia, it's Innovatrix. In Lithuania, we have the Neurotechnology, the startup Identify, BioID and Dermalog from Germany. Estonia have the startup of Veriv, and there's many more biometric companies within the Europe. And however, the significance of the fast developing technologies of AI led that Europe as a continent is already started to slow down in this field. So if we just look at the top biometric modalities, the face recognition, finger recognitions, the European companies are not leading the field. The China, Russia, and USA companies leading this field. And one of the things that the AI white paper implies is that we should strengthening all the areas of AI in the Europe and not weakening. And I will try to look how it would affect the biometric field. So white paper presents and mention a lot of risks caused by AI. However, no distinguish between the technology and the creation of technology. The products and applications are identified. And we see this as a real problem, because one thing is to have the technology, the algorithms, and other thing is to apply those algorithms in various cases. For example, in the public spaces, some of the face recognition is application, and we could think about that. But when we talk about the algorithms, those are the technology part. So we should separate the technology and the new knowledges and the products that are produced by universities, research institutes, even companies from the final applications, which can be applied for a variety of reasons. For example, the object detection technologies can successfully be applied in medicine to detect the cancer, or radiology to detect the problems faster, as well as to identify the obstacles and pedestrians in autonomous vehicles. But some might to abuse the technology and apply the technologies, this object detection technologies, for its own purpose. So AI, from our point of view, is not different from any other technology. So any other technology might be applied for any purposes, but for that we have the laws, and we might look from this perspective. So when we talk about the high risk, an example, the biometric can demonstrate a really good practices how the current situation is dealing with this. So, for example, we have in the biometrics the testing procedures, and unfortunately we do not have the equivalent institutions in the Europe. I will talk about this point, but currently the biometrics are using the independent evaluation institution, the NIST, the National Standard Technology Institution within the United States, as an independent organization which allows to test all the biometric algorithms in terms of the accuracy and the speed. And not only that organization NIST is testing algorithms, it also provides all the information and testing how the algorithms are in terms of biases of the age, the race, and the gender. And for the decades, European companies have used that NIST biometric evaluation reports to demonstrate, at least within the EU, non-EU companies, non-governmental agencies, that their biometric technology is better than competitors. And what is really good that all the results about the accuracy, the biases are public, and all the best algorithms are in reality not so much of the bias. So it really need to be separated, the creation of the technology and the products from the applications, and it would solve definitely a lot of problems. In Europe, the specialized testing centers, AI testing centers that was mentioned in the white paper, can be that institutions to ensure the safe and ethical products would be used in market. So by looking into the NIST experience as analogical organizations within the EU, could be that testing lighthouses to ensure that all the ethical behavior of the algorithms, and be as a lighthouse. So while we agree that AI applications should be centric, ethical, sustainable, and respect fundamental rights and values, we actually found quite a misleading formulations. For example, the remote identification mentioned in white paper have the different definition than it's used in academia and the businesses. So when we took simple example, for example, license plate recognition in every parking lot, it's currently using the remote identification because it's cheaper to run the necessary computations within a cloud or separate devices than to create standalone smart systems in each parking lot, which requires a lot of looking and are expensive. So the clear definitions and slightly changed definitions would lead to less misleading interpretations. Few other things that it's worth to mention, that all regulations could be applied to all fields. We think that AI should not be separated from any other technology and should be technology neutral. Current liability directives mostly cover, and currently the responsibility is taken by the product owner. On the other hand, if we will have the testing centers, which can be independent institutions, which ensure the quality of AI-related problems, it definitely give a more satisfaction to the trust of AI products. Also, the idea of having human in the loop is great in some cases. However, in majority of the cases, it would mean that the automatization of easily automated tasks. And since we have the wide definition of AI, we should only say that in specific cases where the human in the loop is necessary, the automatization is needed. After all, the proposal to log all the experiments and collecting all the data of the AI products, not only the technological counterproductive, but also might interact with data regulation and protection regulation, GDPR. So finally, we also think that high-risk definition is too wide, and that's it from the biometric point of view. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Linus. I think you raised quite a few questions for our upcoming panel discussion and for Ms. Serena to try to answer. I would like to now give the floor to Mr. Andreis Vasiljevs, who is the CEO of Tilde Latvia. And well, he can tell more about himself and how they will be impacted by the future AI regulation himself. Andreis, have the floor.
Good afternoon. Glad to participate at this online event. And in my presentation, I would like to raise the issue of multilingual aspects of AI, a way how AI communicates with users. And this is area where we do work a lot in Tilde company and with our cooperation partners, and what we believe are strategically important for the future of European AI. And the vision of European developments in AI is very strong and distinctive, to put a focus on human aspects, to make AI human-centric, to really become a world leader in cutting-edge ethical and secure AI based on human values, and to meet citizen needs and aspirations. That sounds very ambitious and also very important. But one aspect what we believe is not sufficiently emphasized in the current strategies, and it's overlooked. It's a communication aspect in artificial intelligence, and this is probably the most visible way how we interact with AI and understand AI, because AI is not anything unique. It's everywhere. It's in many devices and almost in every phone. And we do have these applications that we can interact and talk with devices. And like in human communication, in communication with AI, language is extremely essential. And unfortunately, the most of AI developments are focused on the largest global languages only. And this is because of economic reasons. There are big markets, there are big investments. But at the same time, in Europe, we do have more than 24 official languages of the European Union, and 60 other languages are widely spoken. And we believe that our native languages, like my language, Latvian, with less than 2 million native speakers in Europe, is as important as larger languages. And users in my country and in Lithuania and Estonia as well want to use their language in communicating with AI devices. And this has also a very strong economical effect, because users do not want to purchase products or use online services that are not in their languages, and they will not use AI features if they are not provided in their language. Some may say, yeah, everybody can use English. English is ubiquitous. Everybody understands English, but that's by far not true, because more than 60% of Europeans do not speak English well enough to hold a simple conversation. So the answer to this challenge is in providing AI-based language technologies and in making AI multilingual, and in empowering all European languages for the digital age, for the age of AI. But already in 2011-2012, the experts in all European countries joined their voices, providing the assessment of language situation in technologies in Europe. And they raised the critical alarm that at least 21 European languages is in danger of digital extinction, meaning that it's not sufficiently developed in digital technologies. And unfortunately, languages of Baltic countries and actually other languages of Scandinavian countries as well are in this risk area of languages in danger. And what we believe that this is a challenge, but this language diversity is also a great opportunity for Europe to become the leading player on the global scale in multilingual technologies, in AI that can understand people and that can communicate with people in their native language. And especially in European Union, we need to provide equal support for all EU official languages at least, and other regional languages as well. And this is a mission of companies like Tilde, and our role is to advance AI-based language technologies for enabling all linguistic communities in Baltic countries and in Europe to use technologies in their languages. And we work in all three Baltic countries, all three Baltic capitals, our teams, and our clients are across Europe and globally, with many leading global companies in the list of our clients. And the particular aspect in this is a collaboration. And we believe that these collaboration mechanisms that Europe was strong in previous periods should be even further developed and strengthened in the future to consolidate the excellence of many players and companies to get a critical mass of know-how and innovation to lead in many areas of AI, including language technologies. And research is particularly important in Tilde. We do have a strong research team with 11 PhDs. We cooperate with many academic institutions, more than 13 universities, and publish our work. And with industry and academia research cooperation is also extremely important aspect for European future in AI. And if we talk about these aspects where language-centric AI is being developed, it's machine translation, the way how machine can translate from one language to another, matching human ability in translation, but doing that much faster and also much cheaper. It's speech recognition, understanding human speech, and being able to communicate in voice, and combining different technologies, human language understanding, and providing answers to humans in natural language, in smart virtual assistants and chatbots. And to advance with sophisticated technologies, there are several aspects that should be covered, and on European scale. And EU has developed important instruments for this, and this should be advanced in the next period as well. And these areas are research and innovation, and we are happy to be part of new network of excellence on human-centric AI. Our institutions across all the Europe, and we are the only Baltic representative in this AI Excellence Center, will advance these technologies. If you look further in the future, research in quantum computing could bring the breakthrough in development of AI and in ability of AI to understand humans and human language in particular. And we are participating in the NEAS-QC project on quantum computing research in this area. Data is extremely important. Europe is doing a lot on collecting and making data available. And in language area, we are part of European Language Resource Coordination Action. And this is to collect the rich data what is available in public institutions, the language data, textual data, documents, translations that are extremely valuable to develop language technology applications. And this type of data should also be made public and shareable and available. And cooperation platforms, what I already mentioned, and we are part of AI for EU platform, that consolidate tools and services and efforts of leading AI players in Europe in different AI areas, and on European Language Grid platform, what is focusing on consolidating services from language technology companies and research institutions. And when, of course, these research results and technology should be put in good use, and this is about efficient deployment. And some examples where we believe that our region leads in this area is by putting language technologies in the use for public sector, and in Latvia, language technology platform for public administrations, Hugo.lv, provides advanced machine translation, speech technology, and now also virtual assistant platform for public sector services to make them easy to to create multilingual digital services, multilingual chatbots, multilingual communication. And an example is the virtual assistant UNA of Enterprise Register in Latvia, in operation already since 2018, speaking both in Latvian and in English, and providing an easy way to understand and to start business in Latvia, registered company, and to process necessary documents and so on. Another example of with capabilities of virtual assistants, language savvy virtual assistants, is a very recently developed COVID bot. It's a reaction to this COVID crisis, where our company joined with a tech company in Latvia, and in a very short time, also in cooperation with this governmental platform, developed the bot what provides answers to all the critical questions regarding COVID situation, and it's widely used in Latvia, and it's integrated in many public websites and municipality websites of Latvia, reaching people where they are looking for information. And again, sometimes when we talk about this multilingual challenge, people are a bit skeptical. Is it really solvable? Like, can machine translation to be as useful as human translation? And again, example of the power of technologies like machine translation is EU Council Presidency Translator for the presidency starting from Latvian, Estonian presidency, and now back to German presidency. We provide machine translation support for presidencies that can instantly translate thousands and thousands of documents and provide access to information for delegates and journalists and visitors of presidency events. And yeah, you can just check EU presidency website, EU2020.de, to see how this works in action. But if you look to the future, these are some examples where language-centric AI shows its power, but it should be extended much broader. And for this, I should not enough emphasize the importance of cooperation and partnership across Europe. And we are happy to be part of the team that work on AI public-private partnership proposal to create this large-scale partnership of the largest associations in Europe, like Big Data Value Association and EU Robotics, and CLARE, together with European Commission, to join forces in implementing ambitious strategic goals and defining what is needed for industry, what is needed for research, and how jointly with European Commission, public sector and academia can achieve these important goals. And again, stressing the political importance of this aspect, 2 years ago, European Parliament adopted almost univocally the resolution on language equality in the digital age, urging both European Commission and member states to come up with dedicated policies how to cross this technology gap, how to provide equal opportunities in using AI to all language communities in Europe. And this is a very strong call And we believe that in European strategy on AI, it should be reflected accordingly. And currently, we do not see this in the current version of white paper, and we believe that this aspect should be included and strengthened in these documents. And language diversity can be turned from a problem to asset. In Europe, Europe is already very strong in research area. Europe is strong in understanding this importance of privacy, protection and regulation, ethical framework. And now it's a question about implementation and creating instruments, how to bring research results, transfer those into widely used products in innovation by providing support for technology transfer, by helping innovative SMEs and startups, by making data available, by providing access to high-performance computing, always neural network models for language understanding. They require huge computing power, and currently this power is out of reach for SMEs. And creating cooperation mechanisms, support mechanisms for industry, academia cooperation, and in this way to achieve true inclusiveness, so to make AI accessible to all Europeans irrespective of a mother tongue. So my urge is let's work together and let's include that in European strategy, these aspects to make Europe a European AI truly multilingual. Thank you.
Thank you, Andres, for an awesome presentation on everything about languages in Europe and further on. And before going to the panel discussion, I just would like to ask Irina Orsich whether she would like to address any of the points stated by the two previous speakers now or not.
I can do it now. I can also do it during the discussion, whatever you prefer.
If you have like a reflection, maybe you can just make a few statements now, and then discussion, I guess we'll have more questions and more points to discuss about.
Okay, so I take them a bit the way I noted. So on the multilingual, there is not much I would address. I just completely agree. And it was very good to see in detail some of the measures we are doing, like the public-private partnership and things, and the excellence centers. And indeed, Europe is very much in favor of multilingualism, and we find it's very good to support that with AI. And we are also very happy to see that countries like Latvia are real front runners on that, and that everybody can learn from it, can use the tools. And actually, I remember when I got the Latvian strategy, when Jannis sent it to me, that he also sent the translation tool with it, and we were very happy to use that. So very good. Now on the biometrics, first point for me to have something like NIST for Europe. This is something we are discussing now. So we saw that contribution to the public consultation. We also were discussing with NIST and have reading a lot about them. And we had other proposals in the public consultation, not to have a NIST-like structure, but also to have something like the FDA, so Food and Drugs Agency in the US like structure. But it's clear that in Europe, we shall look like really who could do the testing, who could look after the standards, and that we need some expertise and we need some bundled expertise. And to create a NIST-like structure would really be one option for it. Now we are still in the middle, or rather in the beginning of the discussions after the public consultation. But yes, this is something we are discussing. Then on the misleading word remote, Yes, we took very well note of that, and we also took note that there is a glossary on biometrics and the different termini which are used for that. So indeed, when we come forward with something legal, we need to be very concise and precise. But it's also clear, as Lena said, that we were relating in that context to the mass surveillance. Now, we have this discussion about technological neutrality. It's a tricky one because it's true that when we would start regulating AI, it would be also a precedent for regulating one specific technology, so not being neutral. So one of the questions is this really justified by the opaqueness, by the specificities of the technology? We wouldn't have issued the white paper if we hadn't thought that there is something very specific AI which makes it different from other technologies. And it's exactly this opaqueness and this you cannot really know the outcomes in advance, where we felt that there might be a need for legislation. There have been a number of voices in the public consultation saying also that we should regulate algorithmic decision-making in general, so much broader. And also because there is an opaqueness, and then we indeed are technological neutral. We are also more future-proof. But on the other hand side, the risk we are seeing indeed is that then we will be regulating a lot, and we really want to focus on the high-risk applications. It's interesting to hear that you find that this is already too broad, whilst we thought that what we were putting in the white paper was rather narrow. But this is also a point where we can really see the very, very different positions of being broader, being more neutral. Now, the data validation being counterproductive, I think this is really something we need to balance for the real high risk applications, where it is felt that a layer is needed. This should happen, I think. And the question of European data, one needs to see how this is going to look in practice. And for the human in the loop, indeed, this should not relate to a de-automation, like you said, but it would apply to certain tools where it's feasible, but it's also clear that we don't want to stop the innovation with that, and we don't want to have the human behind every machine also, since we know from, for example, the automated driving, that the latency time of a human to get back in control is much too long, as if this would be really a mitigating measure. So this is something we are considering to apply really where it is appropriate, where it's feasible, without hampering innovation. And I think for me, those were the most important ones. But if you have a concrete question, please ask it, or if you want me to comment on something concrete.
Thank you very much, Irina, for your feedback. And yes, I believe there will be a few questions for you later on. But now we officially go to the panel discussion part. And I want to invite all the viewers, of which we have almost 600 at the moment. I invite everyone to leave their questions or comments in the Facebook event page of this conference, because Google, interestingly, decided that this our stream is either very friendly for children or not so friendly for children. Therefore, we have no comments under the YouTube stream. For the information, the link to the Facebook event page where you can leave your comment or question is immediately below the video stream on the YouTube live page. So, as I just gave a feedback to Google, I will ask Mr. Paulius Vertelka, who is Google policy and policy manager, I believe, for Central and Eastern Europe in Warsaw, but currently in Vilnius. I have one joint question for you. Quite recently, Google CEO published a kind of a policy paper and gave support to the AI regulation in Europe in general, and that it could, and said that it could be helpful. I think that quite a lot of people in the AI ecosystem were quite surprised by this, because Google is usually painted as a bad guy in a lot of issues, but it was very interesting to read. And maybe you could comment on why does Google believe that AI regulation could be helpful for Europe, and also what are the key recommendations and key areas to focus on?
Yes, thank you, Arunas. I'd like to just start off saying that yes, I am a Google Government Affairs and Public Policy Manager for Central Eastern Europe, but I'm also a dedicated personal point of contact for governments in Latvia and Lithuania. So I happen to know some of you, met some of you before in various discussions, and I'm delighted to be here. Now, coming back to your question, why Google is supporting Commission's call to work out a regulation for AI. I think even in the Sundar's op-ed that you're referring to, he clearly said that there are multiple lessons across history where technology was very useful. For example, internal combustion engine, allowed people to move around, but also increased risks of accidents, high-speed accidents, things like that, right? That then called for government regulation to come in. Similarly, the internet allowed for free flow of information globally, but also helped the spread of misinformation. So this kind of historic takeaways that we have are also suggesting that we should take a look at AI with responsibility and see where the potential problems lie. We already know that deepfakes or ill-intended uses of facial recognition are the areas that we would like to prevent from being used or abused in a bad way. Thus, for those reasons, we called publicly for a need to figure out a regulation on AI. And we also said that it is also very, very important to have an international agreement on the core values, on the core principles. And I think that that is specifically of great interest to business community that operates on international level, so that their models, their innovation can fit the standards and work for as many people as possible. I hope I answered my question. It's a far away kind of start, but the reason is there.
Yes, you not only thank you, Paulius. You not only answered your question, but also gave grounds to a very good question to Ms. Irina Orsik. What is the European position, like the common European position on our place in the world on AI? I mean, how do we foresee cooperation with such industry giants such as USA or China, and how will we make sure that our ethical view into AI, if I can just simplify it to such words, will be a common standard somehow across the globe, not only in Europe?
Thank you. Well, we believe. I think nations are in some respect different from each other, and you can see that, for example, with data protection, where European citizens from some countries have many more fears than people in other parts of the world. And if we look, for example, at China, I think there are differences in the mentality and the attitude towards the state, towards community, and with that also in the attitude towards things like data and transparency. And the same on different points in the US. Now, Europe really, for the people and for also the companies, some companies, to use AI, it is important that they trust the system, that they're not afraid of it. So this is why we call this trustworthy AI. And I believe for Europe, this is really also a precondition to kick off not to kick off, but to continue to speed up the adoption of certain tools in practice. So this is important. Now, where we see our place in the world is, yes, we are cooperating internationally. And for example, we were closely involved in the OECD recommendation, which also has all the principles for trustworthy AI. We don't want to do this on our own. We would love to have something like an international agreement, like an international standards. But then again, also in some places, the fears are different from other places. So this is also something I think one need to reply to. But at least we should have something like a minimum consensus worldwide. Does this answer the question, or would you like to hear more?
No, it's absolutely fine. Thank you, Irina. I see an angry hardcore developer in our screen, Mr. Alexas Pielikis. And I know we've discussed among us quite a few times the language differences in which speak the policymakers, the developers, and actually the society in general. And if the policymakers are someone in between of those two major differing parties, the developers have usually quite a different view on how AI is actually working and how many myths surround it. So, Alexis, if I may ask you, how do you think big of a role has the communication about artificial intelligence, about real artificial intelligence, which we are currently capable of having? And do you think that both countries and the European Union in whole gives quite enough attention to this point? Because, well, we do see it as quite a big of a threat to all the processes involved with AI.
Well, hello all. First of all, I'll shortly introduce myself. I work at Neurotechnology, and I also am part of Artificial Intelligence Association of Lithuania. Actually, most of my responsibility at work now is more legal, that is intellectual property related stuff. So, but anyway, to answer the question, it's always probably, I would say, difficult to reconcile between public perception of technology and reality on the ground. And this case is not different. So lots of issues with fears from the public are exaggerated, are mostly, well, as you know, are mostly come from fantasy movies and stuff. But anyway, if you look into the future, some of these fears are very real. But this regulation might do in practical sense is that we are forced to we always are forced to do double job when we create something, like I don't know, to explain on the specific example. If we talk about data validation, that is talks about a lot in the white paper. So from practical standpoint, it sounds a bit odd to have that. It's easily understandable why somebody would want that, but in actuality, when you train some neural network or something, you have this initial data set, but it's actually often that you apply some modifications to it to address some issues, biases and stuff. That is, you may have the same data set, and you know that there is inherent bias within it, but you can apply some computational processes that compensate for it. So to stress this data validation, as Lina said, may be counterproductive, because the whole process of the this AI training and stuff is very sensitive to all parameters, not just data, but the specific model, architecture of a neural network, and the parameters of I don't want to get into technical details, but there are lots of stuff apart from data itself that can affect the outcome. So what Linus thought, and also you, that this NIST model, where you analyze the AI as a black box, like NIST does in the case of biometrics, it is more practical for these specific applications to do it this way, because you just separate yourself from all the parameters that are hard to interpret for a person outside. Even sometimes for a person that develops the system, it's hard to understand how this will influence the outcome. But if you take only as a black box approach, it sometimes is better to evaluate the model. So I'm sorry for this technical monologue, but anyway. So what else I want to tell? Yeah, I guess I'll finish on that. I'm sorry for this technicality, but yeah, I want to take it to tell it. So yes.
Thanks, Alex. The technicalities are a fun thing, but I just wanted to ask if Dovydas is still with us. Maybe because I know that Dovydas has quite a view about the importance of myth busting the artificial intelligence and the actual capabilities of it. So I have a joint question for you. One a part is the same which was to Alex. Well, how important is myth busting, and why do we need to do it? And also another question is, it is regarded more to the COVID-19 and a lot of hype around artificial intelligence during the recent months. And but how actually, from the developer's perspective, how capable are we to actually come up with solutions, with working solutions in the current data availability climate and so on, to actually produce something useful to fight off COVID-19?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great questions. Thanks, Runas. I'm sorry, everybody. I stepped out for maybe 10 minutes to grab something to eat, because no lunch and meetings immediately after the event. So first of all, myth busting, right? I personally found that we have like quite a big problem in this industry. Then people converge, or I don't know, mix AI and AGI, and that's a very slippery slope. As like in like a lot of conversations, even, you know, like it seems that everything is going fine. We are talking about the same things, like actual machine learning based implementations, and then somebody, will this technology like replace humans or something like that? It's like, unfortunately, the naming is terrible, and especially the media uses AI where it should clearly be AGI. Like, I wish that we didn't have the same name for like these two very, very different things. So myth busting is extremely important, because if you don't do that, the community, the society, they continue to be confused. They continue to like misplace values. They continue to like have these unfounded fears about this technology. The technology is like really nothing super fancy. It was called machine learning like 10 years ago. Nobody was like a super like involved in we must regulate machine learning, or we must regulate software development. These things, they're like stable and like, I guess stabilized is the word which I'm looking for. Then maybe deep learning shown us that like artificial intelligence can do more things than just work with tabular data. We can work with unstructured data, and deep learning was this, I guess, like tipping point where this confusion started to happen. I personally I really love AGI. I love Nick Bostrom and like his super intelligence book, by the way. It's very, very interesting for me to like think about this thing philosophically, but it's a pity when we like converge these fears about AGI to like hinder the progress of actual machine learning solutions. That's like first question about myth busting. The second one was about COVID-19 hype and artificial intelligence. So my take on it is we probably there are some like research, I think. I don't remember, was it Google Brain or maybe I don't remember exactly, but one of the Google's like acquired companies. They're trying to use AI to help to develop the vaccine, but like it's, in my opinion, like vast majority, or even pretty much like maybe close to everybody, cannot really use artificial intelligence to develop the vaccine. We can do a lot of other things though. We can help to identify, like there are like lots of initiatives such as coughing, maybe like identify that this coughing pattern can be more dangerous and like require or suggest future more in-depth testing, or like even doing like CT scan like analysis using computer vision algorithms. So we can help in these, in my mind, not like the solution ways, but a little bit more of a prevention or improving the quality of life during this quarantine moments. As in, even in addition to that, even things as simple as helping the doctors who, like, and the patients who don't have access to like their usual medical services, even helping them out to get medical services at home, in my mind, is super important. I've consulted this new startup, actually part of the Trustworthy AI community. They're looking to build like diabetic retinopathy like model, which can work on mobile devices and using just a simple lenses. Like you have to get this additional cheap lenses, and if you make the photo correctly, you can like track your this disease progress for you, because usually you would have to go to your doctor and visit your doctor every few months, but you know, it's pretty much impossible. At least it was impossible a month ago, and it might be impossible after 2 months. So like there are lots of solutions where AI can help indirectly, but I don't think that we should like focus all of our efforts. Yeah, let's pretend that this AI is like magical thingy which somehow finds the machine where we cannot do that. So I think it's more about like finding statistical patterns and maybe automating some of the things which can be automated and like made them a little bit more democratized during this quarantine moments. Yeah, so that's my answer. Thanks, Runas.
Thank you, David. That's a very interesting point of view. Now I would like to jump to Mr. Mindaugas Civilka, who is I don't know how to actually tell, a tech lawyer at TGS Baltic. And I have a very specific question for you. You do consult quite a lot of tech companies, and AI companies are among them. You as a legal advisors, as counselors, what legal obstacles do you usually see in terms of, well, company's business case versus regulation, which is either present or will be present someday?
Yes, thanks, Runas. Indeed, a splendid question, even if I have no answer to this, and I don't think anybody would have right now. Basically, yes, we have quite a few, I would say, companies which do have certain AI. Well, not AI. I really hate this definition. Well, term basically, which is coined and misleads everybody. But basically, they do have something to do with algorithms, and they use algorithms in one or another way. And well, frankly speaking, there is no single legal issue which has come up to me recently and in my life as a practitioner, which is related to classical AI issue or AI legal issue, right? Which would be coined as AI legal question, which would beg for some kind of regulation. Well, so to put it in a simpler words, what we normally do, we of course consult companies, but we use the same legal concepts which are being used for many years, and I personally don't see why we would need any additional concepts to be used. So basically, from regulation point of view, so as a practitioner, I don't see many new regulation or many new principles which are needed at all. And basically, I can say a lot of problems which relate to contracts, to IP, but basically none of these begs for any kind of new regulation. But if we look at a more conceptual level, of course, you can see that there are certain areas which are more or less worth at least discussing. And I agree totally that the first thing to discuss and basically to tackle is the myth and misconception of AI. So if we are dealing with this, and if we have at least some kind of education of society at large and policy makers in particular, then more or less 90% of the problems will go away. The remaining 10% may be broken down in the following. The first one is the risk approach, which is provided, which is basically proposed by the European Commission. I'm totally with that. I'm totally fine with the risk approach, which is embedded in the white paper. But again, if you look at it, you see that indeed there are a number of areas which at least raise some kind of doubts. And for example, if you look at Germany, it's very interesting. They have said that this risk approach is too narrow, it's too weak, and it should be tightened. So this is one way to look at it. And for example, what they say is, look, there are risky, high risk, technologies which may be freely used in the fields or in the ways which pose no risk. In other words, what the Germany camp says is that, look, we need to tighten it and to forbid or to ex-ante regulate high-risk technologies, even if their use is not giving rise to serious consequences, which I'm totally against. For example, me personally, I think that we have, and the European Commission may have too much of the regulation if it goes this way. Then from a practical experience, I see one very specific obstacle, right, where the over-regulation may lead to catastrophic consequences, right? And this is copyright directive, European Union copyright directive. And you know very well that data mining and text mining techniques are very widely used in the world, and basically all of these are more or less based on some kind of algorithms. And unluckily enough, European Union directive is a big obstacle for that, because every right holder, IP, copyright right holder, every content holder may easily opt out and say, no, we don't want your crawler, your data mining machine to be used with our content, and we forbid you. I mean, we forbid you to do that. Whereas in US, for example, they have a fair use concept, right, which is a very good concept and which allows every fair use, including the data mining for copyright content, which instantly gives tremendous competitive advantage to US companies in that respect. So in other words, AI developers in the European Union already have a big headache how to overcome Article 4 and Article 3 of copyright directive, which, well, I haven't heard many of the problems, practical problems here, but well, I'm more than sure that content holders, the right holders, will use this power to say, no, we don't want data miners to use our content without our consent and permission, which is one very clear example how over-regulation and over-tight regulation might lead to catastrophic example. The other one is, of course, regulation of technology as such. Linus has brilliantly presented the problem. In my 20-plus years of experience, I saw many cases where technology was tried to be regulated, and I know where it has led. And you know what? In most of the cases, as Dovydas has, and by the way, Polius also has stressed very correctly, the rationale behind this regulation of technology is fear. And I don't know why, well, at least I don't see why we should be afraid of this technological development as such. I mean, there is nothing, well, of course it's going on and it will go on, and it's only the name AI, but this is the name of this technological development wave. So, and just to give you an example of how technology was tried to be regulated in Lithuania. You know, the law on bicycles. We had the law on bicycles, bill on bicycles, which has never been enacted. You know why? Because there was only several articles, and it was funny enough, and the basic principle behind it was that, there is nothing much you can regulate about using the bicycle and owning the bicycle. And all the articles were about the tracks, about the infrastructure, and about the pistos of an infrastructure for bicycles. And then, it was decided, let's leave it to the general law on traffic, because, we don't need to regulate bicycles, we don't as such. So do we want to regulate vacuum cleaners and so on? Of course, no. And but it's not that easy to answer, because the German example shows that there is something which we still may miss by this kind of approach that, and for example, the massive surveillance is one of the examples where I totally agree with the German approach that, yes, this is exactly where we may have problems of civic society and massive criticism from privacy and, basically society. And so I would rather say that there are, of course, areas where regulation is indispensable, but in my as practitioner's view, general law is totally enough and totally perfectly fine. And don't create any more obstacles, because there are a lot of obstacles already. I don't talk about general data protection regulation, which is a headache in itself. don't create any more, please.
Thanks a lot, Mindaugas. And actually, you have just at the very end touched the next, I think, the most terrible topic there is in the world, which is a GDPR. And I have a joint question for you, Mindaugas, and for Ms. Irina Orsich. First part is for Mindaugas, and just a simple question. How true are actually the fears about the GDPR? Because, well, we in our practice, in the kind of work with policy makers and with private sectors, we see a lot of miscommunication about it, and we see a lot of painting it in much worse colors than it actually is, and a lot of depends in national implementation on how it's structured, and also a lot depends on the competencies of data agencies and other bodies involved in the process. So basically, at some point, I know at least a few country cases where GDPR has become kind of an answer to all questions which relate to data within the policy makers. We will not do this. It's against the GDPR. So first part of the question is for you. How real are the problems raised while talking about the GDPR? And the second part of the question goes to Irina Orsich, and what the Commission is planning to do with the communication about the GDPR, because we from the civil society and from the at least AI community and data community see a big issue about, again, about there being so many myths about the GDPR that we cannot actually ourselves tell where is the truth anymore.
Well, Arunas, you're right. Yes, GDPR was a big topic for, well, several years already, and, well, again, a lot of myths about that. In practical terms, I would say that data protection indeed was always there. By the way, I mean, it's not a new thing. Data protection is since, well, a topic in the EU since 1995. I mean, we had directive, 1995. We had local law in Lithuania since 1996. So GDPR, what made, well, reformed a bit directive, but it hasn't enacted it in a new way. Well, it has reformed, of course, but it's not a new thing. And that's why it's, from one end, it's a bit worried that it's only now that it's a topic. And I know why, because of the sanctions, because of the hectic fines, and because of the buzz which is going on. So, well, in principle, my message number one is that data privacy is not a new phenomenon. It's not a new framework. It's the framework which is already for 25 years in EU and Lithuania, and it's only, well, of course, it's refurbished, but it's nothing new about that. So in principle, businesses were always required to comply with certain, well, minimum requirements, and I don't go through these, but, well, so as a topic, it's not new. Then what's new, of course, it's the attitude of authorities, it's the attitude of media, and it's the attitude of society, well, to these topics. And, well, in practice, I wouldn't say that GDPR as such poses that many obstacles to AI, for example, to use of AI. Well, I don't see any at all practical problems. Of course, there are certain problems related to traceability. For example, if we go with the requirement to trace and to store the data in each of the, well, in each of the use of the algorithm, and so that, for example, if something happens, you can open the black box, right, and to see where it happened, why, and so on. So this kind of traceability requirements may lead to data recording, which is already a bit excessive from the personal point of view. But again, these are very tiny questions, well, not tiny, very important questions, but these are technical questions which may arise. But in general, I don't see that many really problems in practice. I haven't come up with many of them in my practice which are related to GDPR. Of course, automated decision-making is always something which is being spelled out, and really GDPR has one article, Article 22, which is the only EU law provision which talks about AI. And it says very simple things. It says very correct things, which I'm totally 100% with that. It says only one, well, set of rules. First of all, people should know and should be in advance notified about use of algorithms for automated decision making. That's it. Secondly, the person or human being can always ask for the human intervention if he doesn't agree, to be not dehumanized, or in other words, it has the right to ask the human to be, involved in the automatic decision making. It is something which is related to, well, serious consequences to him, or if the decision may pose serious consequences to him, which is again fundamental, so far principle of human intervention, and it's only limited in cases where it may lead to serious decisions or serious consequences. Again, it's up to interpretation. What does it mean? But so on. Basically, that's it. And I don't see why this, as such, should be a big hurdle in regulation of AI, in application of AI. So, in short, GDPR is always it's often used as an argument to say that no, this is not allowed, or no, sorry, this is a problem from the GDPR perspective, and we can't do that. But in reality, in many cases, GDPR allows that. And the problem with GDPR is that many think that GDPR provides clear answers to all the questions. No, it's only the set of principles. And GDPR is a set of principles which it depends highly on how you apply it and how you interpret it. And if you have prudent and sensible persons who apply it, then there is every option, every availability which you can find under GDPR. And it boils down to the only one sentence which I think you can take away with it. So, there is only one thing you should know about GDPR, which is explain it. Explain what do you do, and be able to explain. And that's it. If it makes sense, and if you can explain it, of course there are, of course you should disclose a lot of things in privacy policy, but I don't see why this is a problem, because it was for ages, this kind of requirement to explain, and to disclose that in transparent way to the consumers. But basically, it boils down to the one very simple rule: explain what you do and explain why you do that. And in many cases, this is missing. In many cases, people which come to the lawyer, they think that the answer is already in the GDPR, and they expect that the answer is written somewhere. No. There is no answer in the GDPR. The answer is in the business. The answer is in those who apply it, and you only need to find it. That's it. But so I don't know what they have explained it to you, but so GDPR in a nutshell is not an obstacle. The obstacle is those who apply it.
Thanks, Mindaugas. Irina?
Thank you. You know that recently there was a commission communication on the future of GDPR. So it has been evaluated with its first results. It's still, yes, there is a tradition of data protection in Europe, but GDPR as such is a very young instrument. It came into force only in May 2018. And so they evaluated it to see whether there is anything on top which needs to be changed. And the result was that as a legal instrument, it is fine. But there are a couple of measures to be taken to improve the implementation, to improve the enforcement. And I would just pick 3 points. I think one of the problems, and that is also something you mentioned, Arunas, is indeed the national agencies, which are not all well equipped for the implementation of GDPR. This really depends from country to country. And let's say also in some countries there is a much stronger will to enforce it than in other territories, which then brings us to the fact that there is a very diverse implementation in Europe. On top of that, you have the possibility to have like extra rules on top of GDPR, which means that we have a pretty diverse picture when it comes to the national implementation. And there, I believe something which really is needed is more coordination. So strengthening of some of the agencies, but in particular, and this is just also because it is very young, but that in the future, then the coordination and the discussions and the guidance and everything between the national authorities be strengthened. And the rest, then give it a few more years to be seen.
Thank you very much. Great answer, by the way. I would like to now move back a bit from the tough legal questions and come back to Andreis Vasilyevs, who spoke extensively about multilingualism. And I have actually a very, very, very concrete question. So, as I understood from what you spoke during your presentation, the multilingualism in European AI is at the same time quite a challenge, but also an opportunity. Well, could you please just elaborate more on this? How can it be an opportunity if we all know that, well, development of, every single model, algorithm, and so on in different languages costs a lot of money? And is it feasible to actually to be an opportunity?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And if we look on the nature of competitiveness, you have to find your positioning, your niche, your market need, or society need, what you do address better than others. And there's a strong need, not only in Europe, but on global scale for multilingual solutions. Where are about 7,000 languages spoken on this planet. About 150 languages with more than 1 million speakers, or so, like with sizable communities. So 150 languages. But the current developments on AI on global scale are actually limited to about 15 languages only, spoken by about a half of global population. So meaning about a half of people living on this planet are not sufficiently served by AI developments in language field. And this is a problem for these users and the need that should be addressed. And Europe, by its nature of having so many different nations speaking in different languages, we do understand the language problem. We do have expertise in Europe. And for example, Google Translate, how Google Translate was developed by taking European expertise, two bright guys, Frank from Europe, from University of Aachen, and who developed these first machine learning algorithms or machine translation. And many other examples, like at Microsoft Translator also, it's this European team, speech recognition, also understanding human speech. It's born from European research, and actually a lot of that research has been funded by European Commission. So we do have this expertise in Europe. But currently, global players like GAFA companies are benefiting from this expertise. There's brain drain from Europe to US and now also increasingly to China because they understand the value of this expertise. In Europe, we have to create mechanisms, but these researchers and innovators are interested to stay in Europe and to advance these technologies in Europe, but they are able to grow globally and to provide these solutions for Europeans first, but for the global community as well. And there are so many fantastic needs. We are just scratching the surface of what's possible with AI-based language technologies. Currently, it's more about communication, translation, speech recognition, text processing, but we have tons of information or waste amount of information described in human language, in textual, video, audio format. And currently, machines are not good in understanding that information. It's how to extract knowledge out of this human language information. This is the next challenge. This deep human language understanding. And this is a great opportunity for Europe to be a leader in this field and to concentrate expertise from many researchers across Europe and consolidate activities of different countries and to achieve this critical mass, what is necessary to have a breakthrough in research, to be able to transfer these research results into innovative solutions, and to provide funding to scale up these solutions on a global scale. That's my answer.
Thank you very much, Andres. I think there are very good points for the future on how to see this. But now, well, coming back a bit to the European Commission's and Europe's perspective, I have one question which quite often remains forgotten. If you ask any developer, the main thing in artificial intelligence is data. I mean, it is the cornerstone of all algorithms and all solutions and so on. And in terms of data strategy of the European Union, well, at least we here in Lithuania, we have a kind of a view that it somehow policy-wise goes behind all the AI discussions and so on. And well, I see Irina already shaking her head, and I would like you to elaborate whether it is maybe we're not right, and whether the principle that data should come first will be applied here in Europe.
Thank you. I have to admit that I'm not an expert on data. So what I can say is that the data strategy was published the same day together with the white paper on the 19th of February. And it is not lagging behind, but it will be to a large part a front runner. So on the basis of this data strategy, there are several measures planned, and some of them should come, let's say, sometime after summer. And they are already like the capability to share data, questions of interoperability, data lakes, and to create all the infrastructure for Europeans to share their data. That is something to be supported. Because currently, for example, European players are very, very strong and industry players. So there is a lot of industrial data around, but this is not being used. This could be absolutely ideal for building artificial intelligence if you create the right framework that people feel also that there is an added value to share these data. This is one example. There are other examples. Another example, indeed, is also we are sitting on a treasure of public data, which is not always being shared. So this is also something, again, for the Commission and for the member states. And we can see, for example, one of the examples we heard in the opening session was about agriculture. There we have a lot of data from the satellites on the soil and on all kinds of things, which can be very, very beneficial to develop and further develop AI in the field of agriculture. But anyway, I'm so drifting away. So there would be one part of the legal framework on data would be this year, well, after summer. And then for next year, there would be a second part of the things which are more complicated, more legal, more to be thought through. But altogether, this is a real priority of Commissioner Breton. So with all the experience he also has from his previous life in industry, he believes that data is absolutely key for any future development, and not only in AI, but in plenty of new technologies. And this is why it's the first priority to push this forward.
Okay, thank you, Irina. And just a follow-up question, as we are talking about the future already, which is the future of AI is the topic of this whole event. So very broadly and with rough dates, so what is the timeline for AI regulation, upcoming timeline? When can we expect, real actionable moves by the Commission, and to see the legal papers ready, the regulation, if there will be any, and considering that it will take another 2 years to go through all the processes until it is approved on the EU level, then plus 2 years for the implementation. We're already speaking about the year 2025. Don't you think that with such a quick-moving situation, our regulation can be outdated by that time's technology?
Yes, I start with the second question. So that's a danger. And indeed, it's our first objective to have a regulation which is going to be future-proof. And future-proof implies, for example, that when we are talking about high-risk applications, so when we're talking about the scope of the regulation, that we have a definition and that we have a scope which is concise for now, but which opens the possibility without any problem at any time to review what is, if we now stick to the high-risk approach, to see what is considered high risk. So basically you have a legal basis, and then you could imagine we have a couple of procedures for that in place. In the legal EU slang, they're called delegated act or implementing act. But that you can say, like, okay, these are the applications which are no more high risk, and these are applications which now are high risk, and that you can redo that at least on an annual basis without undergoing the whole legal procedure. So that's a clear objective, because we know that otherwise the whole purpose of the new regulatory framework is getting a bit difficult. On the question of the timeline, so we are now discussing intensively a couple of questions. We are still also evaluating the results, the 1,215 plus 400x from the public consultation. And we are planning to have an important event, though online, at the probably beginning of October. So this would go together with the AI Alliance event. So there would be discussion about deliverables from the high-level expert group, but in particular there would be discussions of what we would like to propose as a legal framework. And there would be all kinds of people. It would be a bit like the event today, so with different people from different backgrounds to discuss. That would be in autumn. We then, you know or not, that we have to do a so-called impact assessment. So before we come forward with any new legislation, we need to make an exact analysis of what are the problems, what are the possibilities to address the problems, and how much do they cost. what are the costs for the economy? What are the costs for the environment? What are the costs in the social world for employment? So all this needs to be assessed before we finally can say, okay, this is the way we are going to go. And this impact assessment we are expecting to finalize in autumn, and then we have what we call a regulatory scrutiny board. So we're having experts who are going to look at this, whether our calculations are accurate and not only driven by the political will to go a certain way. And once we are there, then we would come forward with a legislative act. This could be at the end of the year. It could also be in the beginning of the next year. There was a decision to schedule it. Initially, it was with the white paper. We had said we wanted to have something at the end of this year. Then with Corona, we put it forward, the Commission put it forward, and its official scheduling for the beginning of next year. Now it might be that it goes again a couple of months back. What is important is that our intention, if you ask us today, this might change again depending on the circumstances. We would like to have a package, so we would like to have together with the legal framework the coordinated plan. Again, these are the two sides of the same coin, so we want to push in the same time certain things. For example, we also want to look like what kind of experimentation is necessary, what kind of perhaps regulatory sandboxes are necessary. So to really see how this goes hand in hand. And then we, you know that the white paper was also looking into safety and liability questions. So also questions related on a legal framework, respectively the adaptation of the existing legal framework, machine directive and others will be important, and we might go with some of these things in a package or not. This remains to be seen, but this might also influence our timing.
Thank you very much, Irina, for clearance about what we will have in the future and when, especially because I believe it's a quite crucial question for everyone who is interested in this topic. And now, well, as we came back to questions of future regulations, I want to jump back to Paulius Vertelka. Hi. I have a very simple question for you. So, how do you see Google's perspective or the perspective of any big player within the EU regulatory framework, the future EU regulatory framework, and what is Google maybe currently doing to ensure the ethical and standpoint and the safety of its AI solutions already, and what maybe you have planned in the future?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Arunas. It's a fairly broad question, and there's a lot of information on what Google is doing or thinking. So I think it's a dual-edged kind of question coming to us. And we understand that European Commission, and Irina is in that exact spot, right, with all the challenges landing on her desk, trying to figure out, how to make a regulation that's future-proof, but very, very precise and on spot, right, for the technology or its applications that are continuously evolving. It's a magnificent task, and thank you for taking on this challenge to trying to figure out and actually make it work for the benefit of the European AI ecosystem. From Google's perspective, right, I think we submitted 45 pages long kind of report, or the consultation kind of submission to Irina and her team. But I would like to single out maybe 3 key areas that are kind of been touched in today's discussion already. One is let's try to focus on existing regulation and utilizing that before we create something new. And that is, I think, particularly important when we come to liability rules or the new liability frameworks. as introducing strict liability regulation for AI goes, or potentially could go, very much against encouragement to innovate, as increased responsibilities could discourage the spirits to embark on discovery missions. So that's one area that we think it should be very careful. Also, with the ex-ante conformity assessment for high-risk applications, I assume Irene has already heard that from my colleagues in Brussels, and I'm just reiterating that, but for the benefit of everybody, is for that area also, we think that some sort of a combination of ex-ante self-assessment followed by the ex-post enforcement of high-risk applications would likely to achieve a desired result with less trouble for the ecosystem players themselves. But of course, there is a clear need for guidance on how to do, the ex-ante risk assessments. GDPR has something similar in it, but for the AI, it's of course a more complicated matter. And Linas was referring to his work with NIS, and there needs to be a solution there of how to help to do those things, rather than to say that there are hard-coded ex-ante conformity assessments going forward. The third point, also discussed just the question before, is the data question, and the idea that AI systems that are used in Europe should rely on European data could also undermine the quality of those systems, because the more varied data there is, the more accurate the AI system could become as a result. And in practice, and we have plenty of practitioners on this call today, I think they can agree that in practice, it's a lot of third-party data sets that are being used that could be nearly impossible to backtrack and figure out, whether that data was collected in some sort of European standard or not. And just ruling out those data sets would immediately pose a risk, of higher discrimination of European AI models and lower quality in the end. Now coming to the second part of your question, Avinas, and what Google is doing to ensure AI systems are ethical and safe. There's a whole portal with plenty of resources for everybody called AI.Google, if you wish to visit that. But in its essence, we just recently updated our AI principles that are there to help guide the ethical development of AI. And we also have our internal review process that help us avoid bias, test rigorously, designed with safety in mind. And in our principles, we already stated clearly that we will not create technologies that are designed to create harm or to hurt individuals or to violate human rights at large, right? So this is like a complete and clear no-go zones where the technology is not going to be created by Google. I think it's worthwhile to dive into the AI principles for those that feel that they could use the inspiration in their own work. But I also understand that the Commission is also thinking about something similar at some point, and I know that the high-level expert group also published a nice tool just recently that would help developers in terms of questions regarding to ethics and safety. Yeah.
Thank you, Paulius, very much. And well, it's 14:00 in Eastern European Standard Time and 13:00 in Central European Summer Time. So our scheduled time for the end of this online event is at the end. And therefore, just before actually cutting off and leaving the meeting, I would just like to ask all those speakers we still have online whether you have any questions to each other, or to maybe Ms. Irina Orsich, or maybe to Paulius Vertelka, or to Dovydas Čilutka. And if you do, now is the time to ask them. I see no raised hands. Therefore, I would like to thank everyone for participating, for sharing your views, for sharing the views of your companies, for sharing the views of your country. And I especially want to thank Irina Orsich for withstanding this whole amount of questions and our need of information from Brussels. And I believe that, well, we will keep cooperating, of course, because it is for the benefit of us all in this ecosystem. And I would like to especially thank those over 5,500 viewers who are still online and watching either the live event or the replay a few minutes back. You are tremendous people. And well, thank you very much once again. I think that we will keep such events traditional, and after a while we will try to connect most of the people who are here and maybe some others to see how we are moving on, to make some kind of an independent Baltic assessment of the future of AI in Europe. And thank you very much for your time, and please have a nice rest of the day and Friday, and then finally the weekend. Goodbye. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you all.